at CUNY School of Professional Studies. Today we have a very special guest, Ruru Rusmin, who is the director of our Office of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology. Good morning, Ruru. It's great to see you.
Good morning, Jorge. Thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure, and it's a very important discussion we're about to have because you lead one of the most important departments within the School of Professional Studies at CUNY, and that is the office that helps in the design and the preparation and development of courses, particularly online courses, which is the bulk of the courses that we offer. So we're going to talk a little bit about what makes those courses special at SPS. But before we even go there, I would love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about you, how you got into higher education, and specifically why you're interested in educational technology, instructional design, and all the fun stuff that you're doing at SPS.
Sure. Well, I've been working in higher ed since the early 90s. I started with teaching English for academic purposes in ESL, and that was always very valuable work. But during the same time that I was teaching, I was always very interested in the technology that could be used to sort of support that learning. So, I worked with early language learning sort of systems, writing support, software, things like that. And I ended up like running ESL labs in a couple of institutions. But, my interest in technology became probably the stronger element. And so in about 2001, I switched over and I ended up working with faculty as an instructional designer, technology support and training in order to incorporate technology into regular classroom teaching, to enhance the classroom teaching, and also to build what were then new hybrid online. And nowadays we have variations like high flex courses. So I guess it's always been my mission to sort of see how the technology can help support teaching and learning.
So that was back in what year you said? When you started working on hybrid courses?
Oh, 2000, 2001.
Imagine, so over 20 years ago. So you're a true expert and veteran of this field. You have seen it evolve, right, from the very initial attempts at doing online learning to this day. So quite interesting in the context, particularly after COVID or during COVID. A lot of schools obviously had to go online or hybrid, and there seemed to be some confusion as to what an online course is. As a matter of fact, what the definition of online is. And I know there's several differences and several variables of online courses. So maybe for our audience, could you maybe give us a quick summary of what are the differences in the different types of online courses?
Yes, sure. I'm glad you brought up the point about the pandemic because that shift to teaching online, which is a very heroic effort by all teachers of all levels. It made, I think, a lot of us feel we know what online learning is, but there is a distinction between what we call emergency remote teaching versus online learning. So emergency remote teaching was something that was driven out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
But online learning, as I've said, has been going on for decades. So we're talking about decades of experience and research that sort of knows that contributes to the kinds of online learning that we and other institutions design that are deliberately designed and not just like an emergency response, right? So I'd say that if you're looking at online learning, a key sort of term that you'll want to think about is synchronous versus asynchronous. So for folks who are maybe not entirely familiar with this, synchronous means that we're all meeting at the same time, doing class activities at the same time.
Like
And
a Zoom, for
asynchronous means
instance,
that
or what we're doing right now. That would be synchronous. So it's
exactly.
live, it's interactive in real time.
In
Right.
real time, exactly. And asynchronous means that we're not doing it in real time, so that the students are still going through the work and they're still meeting deadlines. So they may be going like week to week or module to module, but they might be doing their work at different times And the flexibility of asynchronous online learning is what is very appealing, I think, to a lot of people.
Mhm.
And
So
in
the asynchronous is the one that is more flexible because you can take the course at the time of the day or the day of the week that better suits your need. Whether you
exactly.
have family obligations or you work full time, that is the methodology that works best for working adults, for instance, who need that flexibility. And that is
Absolutely.
the one that we primarily offer at SPS. Is that correct?
Yes. So the vast majority of our courses are fully asynchronous online. So as I was saying before, you have a class schedule. You're still working through the materials with your classmates, with your teacher, module to
Mhm.
module or week to week. But you might choose to do your readings and your assignments late at night if that suits your schedule, or in the late afternoon. Whatever suits your schedule is
Mhm.
when you're going to
Right.
do the work, and you can pace it. You might be doing everything on the weekends, you might do a little bit every day, really. So it suits not only your schedule but sort of your way of learning. But I don't want to say that it's like completely disconnected from each other, because you're still learning with your classmates and with your teacher, and there's still a lot of interactions, but they might not be live interactions. So they
Yeah.
might be more like a discussion board, like.
Unless, for example, and I taught a course, fully online asynchronous course last semester. I did hold office hours via Zoom, so there were opportunities on a weekly basis for students to interact with the professor or even with classmates who participate in those. And I think most of our professors at SPS try to do that, aspire to have those opportunities. But as you said, the key here is to promote, to incentivize that interaction. So you've seen development over 20 years. You have applied best practices to SPS. You have worked with a fabulous team of faculty members who have become experts at designing a course specifically for this format. So maybe you can share with us what are the keys to making an online course that is effective, that works, that allows students to achieve their learning outcomes.
Right. Well, there's a lot I could talk about, but
Sure.
I'm gonna limit myself to a couple of things, right? So two things. I want to talk about engagement, and I want to talk about sort of a frictionless experience. So first of all, about engagement, right? I think this not only applies to online courses; it applies to any kind of courses. Engagement is really the key. So when we're talking about engagement, what do we mean? So it means that you're engaging or working with the content of what you're learning, that it's interesting to you, that you have a way to approach it, that you're actively doing something with what you've learned, right? So you're not just reading and like, watching stuff, but you actually apply it or you summarize it. So you're actively working with the content that you're learning about. The second pillar of engagement is engagement with the faculty, right?
Mhm.
Because if you think way back long ago, we did have distance learning courses, right? Which is a kind of online learning that were
Yeah.
correspondence courses. So you used to pay your money, you get a packet of materials, you'd read all about it, but
Hmm.
you didn't have much interaction with the instructor, if any. Right? You couldn't
Hmm.
ask questions, you couldn't like ask for clarification, you couldn't throw out new ideas and get feedback about how that, feeds into what you're learning. So
Yeah.
that interaction with the instructor who is the expert in this, who's guiding you through this, I think is the second pillar of engagement. And the third pillar of engagement is with your peers, with the people, your classmates that you're learning with. You know, if
Hmm.
you've ever like if you've ever like gone into the internet and researched a question, you might get an answer to the question, but sometimes you start reading comments, like good comments, right? And you'll see people in the comments really like engaging with each other and saying, "Hey, well, this was my experience. That was my experience. What do you think about this? What do you think about that?" And that kind of dialogue, all right,
Hmm.
is very, very, I think, is very key, right? So the engagement with other people that are grappling with the same issues or learning the same content makes for also a very active class. So you've got three pillars of engagement, right? Engagement with content, with the instructor, and
Right.
with your classmates. And that's what makes a good online course. That's one very important factor.
So I listed all three pillars on our comment section: active learning, instructor interaction, and peer interaction. Now, the logical next question would be, well, what makes an engaging experience, or a more effective experience, um, so that instructor interaction achieves, and that peer interaction and active learning achieves the learning objectives? Do you have examples of how we can make courses more effective, in instruction interaction and peer interaction? Maybe some of the tools you have used in the design of courses at SPS?
Mm-hmm. So I think one thing I would mention is UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. So when you're when you're building the content in an online course, right, you want to reach as many learners as possible. So you don't want to have just one channel, right? So you don't want to have, for example, just mostly text-based things, right? Because people are going to learn in different ways. Some people really do thrive through reading and writing, but others might thrive through different ways of absorbing information, whether it's by watching videos or listening or engaging with the content through listening to people converse about it, right? Or discuss a dialogue about it. And so you want to make sure that you present the content in many different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you hit different kinds of learners. So I think that's one important way that we design it. We design. And what was the second question that you asked about engaging with the instructor?
With the instructor, correct.
Right. Right. So again, this kind of comes back to UDL as well. So as an instructor, right, you want to find different ways for students to approach the material. So we're not talking now just about presenting the material, right? But especially when we're talking about adult learners, who the majority of our population are, they come from a wealth of different backgrounds, and they already have a lot of experiences, right? So you find a way to connect the experiences. I'm sorry, to connect the content that they're learning with what their experiences are, with their experiences or with their goals, right? So there are different ways to sort of like open up the material so it connects, and it has real world applications, right? That it comes in a real world context, and I think that is especially important for adult learners.
Yeah, the context is tremendously important. As a matter of fact, as dean, I have clearly, obviously, interacted with a lot of students at SPS. We have sessions in which I seek their feedback in terms of what's working, what's not, what can be improved. And one comment that I consistently get is that the response from the faculty is prompt, is fast, it's on point, that they feel like they're part of a community,
Mhm.
which is not necessarily easy, right? In an online environment, how do you feel part of a community? But I think we have done a good job at SPS of creating those spaces for interaction. So, for instance, in our LMS, our learning management system, we have several tools that allow us to provoke that interaction. In your experience as a head of OFDIT, our Office of Faculty Development and Instructional Technology, do you have any sense for which of those tools work better than others, or where have we seen more success in terms of those tools?
Yes, I think the tools that are honestly the tools that are easiest to use are the
Mm-hmm.
ones that are going to work best. So this is kind of a
Uh-huh.
little bit related to the second thing that I was saying about the friction-free experience, right? So you might have like a great tool, but if it takes a lot for the students to like get into it, and if it takes a lot for the instructor to set it up, it's not going to work so well, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, we try to find tools, or we try to encourage tools like like Zoom and Collaborate, right? These kind of live
Yeah.
meetings that we're having. I mean, now that we've all experienced the pandemic, we might all say, well, Zoom, I mean, that was always around, but that wasn't always around, right?
Yeah.
that wasn't always
or
available.
not widely used by a lot of faculty members who were teaching online, correct?
Yeah, not necessarily, right? And it wasn't until like the sort of necessity came out for people to say, "Hey, I really need to engage with, I need to really connect with my students, either one on one or in
Mhm.
a small group, in an easy way." That this became more like widely adopted, not just because of the faculty need, but because the students also were like, "Oh, I can do this," right? Zoom,
Mhm.
in comparison to like previous products, I would say Zoom, the thing that helped Zoom sort of win in the pandemic was its ease of use, right? It was
Yeah.
really, really easy for people to just click on a link and they were there, right? And
Yeah, I
perfect.
sometimes use the analogy of the TV remote control. You have sometimes these remote controls that have 50 buttons or 50 options, and you end up using just two or three of them
Mhm,
typically, right? And then I compare that to the for those of you who have an Apple TV, that remote that only has two buttons and you use them constantly. So in my opinion, in my experience rather, students who have an easier time, students and instructors and professors who have an easier time using the tool because they don't get from the get go, they don't get as many options,
mhm.
tend to use it better. So it has to be a gradual training and development of use of different features. It cannot be thrown all at the same time because it becomes overwhelming, and we lose a big opportunity to engage better with the students, correct?
That's right. That's right. Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's sort of, so you were asking about what tools, right? So, we talked a little bit about Zoom, which again, everybody is using now, and you could do it at a drop of a hat, right? When the student says, "Oh, I need to,
You can
I'm
do it. You
confused
can do
about,"
it on the cell phone, even.
right. Say, "I'm
Even
confused about X." So you just say, "Okay, I'm going to send you a Zoom link and let's go and we can look at your paper together." Right. So it's not just discussion. The screen sharing is
right.
very easy to get too. It's like, well, we can look at your paper together, or I can show you how to do X on this website, which you need to do. So it's really, I think the tools that are most effective sometimes are the ones that like we sort of take for granted at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
another tool that I wanted to sort of point out for engagement is something that we have called VoiceThread, right? So
Voice thread. Okay.
VoiceThread, right? So VoiceThread allows for, well, among other things, it allows for discussion, but with audio and video, right? So I think we're used to having discussions, text-based discussions in our online
Mhm.
courses, but VoiceThread makes a really nice alternative, so that I'm not saying that you want to necessarily do this every single week in place of text-based discussions, because again, you want to have more variety, more approaches, more channels, but
Correct.
providing a channel where students can sort of talk uh, and discuss asynchronously. It's still asynchronous, so you might have a question. I would pose my answer either by video or audio, maybe with some slides if I want to throw up some slides, and then later on my classmates might look, that night or the next day, and then respond to my comments as well. So it's like a type of
So
multi.
voice thread would be the equivalent for those of us who use Messenger or any of the text systems on our iPhones or our Android phones. It would be the equivalent of leaving a voice text, correct? So you record it and you post it on your, whether it's your discussion or chat or community based part of your class. Is that correct?
It's a voice text or like a video text,
Or
right?
a video text.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So, do students use more video or audio in your
Well,
experience?
it's hard to put yourself forward, so they would prefer to do audio. So usually we try to
Okay.
design it that, like, okay, for this part, you want to present yourself, because a lot of times it's part of the actual lesson. Especially, for example, if you're doing a business class, right? So you need
Mhm.
to learn how to present yourself like this,
Sure.
like in a video format. So
Sure.
maybe some parts of the lesson or some parts of the assignment might require you to leave a comment in video format, but you might be
Got it.
able to answer, in audio.
Yeah. It also, I think, talks to the need to be, and you mentioned it before on UDL, Universal Design for Learning principles, to be as accessible as possible. Sometimes I have seen very effective courses that combine the use of text with the use of podcast, for instance. So you have an audio component.
Yep.
Some of the books assigned could even be audiobooks for those who prefer to listen versus reading, or it's more accessible in that way. I think one aspect of the School of Professional Studies that I'm very proud of since I became dean is how accessible we make our courses. We think of accessibility. We think of making it available to as wide an audience as possible. Can you talk a little bit of how we managed to do that at SPS?
Yeah, there are many aspects of accessibility. So when we say accessibility, a lot of people think about, sort of like the mandate, right? That you must make all your materials accessible, and that is definitely something that, of course, we do, right? So that's
Sure.
that's sort of like the ground level, right? But when we talk about accessibility, we're talking about, even more than that. We're trying to make, as I said, materials, approaches, open to people with all different kinds of backgrounds and with different kinds of abilities.
Hmm.
So there's not just one way to learn, and there's not just one way to show that you've learned, to demonstrate what you've learned, right? So we try to build in alternatives at every level of the course, not just in the presentation of the materials, not just in like how you learn and engage with each other, and but also how you might like turn in your final projects. There are
Yeah.
different ways of showing what you've learned. And another aspect of accessibility that I really want to quickly mention is also like what we call, well, we do a lot of work with open education resources, right?
Hmm.
Because we don't want the financial cost of textbooks to be a barrier, right? So this is
Yes.
also accessibility, right?
Yeah.
So we work to have a lot of courses that are zero textbook costs, and we even
Yeah.
have three programs that are entirely what we call Z degrees, or zero textbook cost degrees. So you not only do not have to pay for the textbooks, but you have all the materials sort of easily accessible to you and provided to you in the course. So
Yeah, and the statistics, the data I was looking at recently shows that we have already saved over $2 million in the cost of textbooks and materials for SPS students. So, of course, accessibility has an affordability component, right? We are accessible because we are flexible, but also because we're affordable, also because we take into consideration and follow strictly the UDL guidelines, and also because we have that ability for any student to choose their preferred time of day
mhm.
or location. So we like to call ourselves space and place independent. So you can take your classes when it better suits you, but without losing, as we have discussed, that connection between the student and instructor, or student with students in
Right.
that interaction. So let me ask you, and we're starting to wrap up our conversation here, but let
Mhm.
me ask you about what's coming next. We have heard a lot about new educational technology, a lot of investment in the sector. Now there's the metaverse, there's the use of VR and AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, experiential reality, XR, and we we are testing some of those ideas and some of those methodologies at SPS. In your expert opinion, what and it's, I know, very hard to predict, to have a crystal ball, right? But how do you envision a leading school, an innovative school like SPS, will progress in incorporating that technology into our coursework?
Right. I think those technologies are really interesting, and as you said, we are experimenting with them, right?
Mhm.
But I don't want to get too distracted by sort of like what do we call it, like whiz bang technologies. So
Mhm.
I don't want to discount them either, because learning like which situations they are suitable for is important, right? So like VR and AR can be really, I think, useful for certain fields like medical fields, nursing, you know,
Yeah.
things like that. But I think there are also like other maybe under the radar sort of technologies that will make the experience smoother that I think will be important as well. So for example, I'm thinking right now of like where are the points of friction when people are taking an online course, right?
Hmm.
Where is it that they're going smoothly along and then they hit something that slows the students down, or even the instructors, right? Where is it that you slow down because you're meeting technology problems, or you're meeting other kinds of problems, and like so and again, this might seem like not that exciting, but I think instant messaging
Hmm.
is something that's actually needs to be incorporated more in courses, because one of the points of slowdown is when students don't get the answer that they need,
Right
they're
away.
allowed to go through email channels or this or that. So we have faculty who are using Slack. There are things that are being built into classes themselves to have that sort of very quick instant messaging that will answer students' questions quickly, right? And sometimes they're just questions like, where do I submit something, right? And so it doesn't slow them down. They don't have to wait 6 hours necessarily for an answer. So on the one end of the spectrum, we have really exciting technologies like AR, VR. I have seen sort of like platforms that make it easier for the whole class to be together at one time,
Hmm.
engaging in different sorts of activities. Right, those are things that we're experimenting with. Um, Collaborative work, I think, is becoming more and more common, right?
Yeah.
So people working, like maybe not the whole class, but people working in small groups on a document at the same time, not super sexy, but hey, this is like actually uh, extremely useful and important to learning, right? So we're working together on, I don't know, a Word document or a presentation. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
really. What matters is that we are writing and creating content at the same time, but remotely, right?
And it's very likely that one of the first activities you will have as you join the job market, or start working full time, is you will need to collaborate
Mhm.
uh, um, with documents, with presentations, um, in person, verbally, ability to communicate properly. So I'm glad that you're sharing this knowledge with us, and I'd like to summarize some of the key points you have raised. Three main pillars we should pay particular attention to. Make sure that we have active learning embedded in our courses, that there is strong instructor interaction with the students, and that there are plenty of opportunities for peer interaction, interaction among classmates, and of course that we follow universal design for learning. So any final words of wisdom, Ruru, for all the either students or instructors who might be, or general public who might be listening to this interview?
Wow, final word of wisdom. I'd say, you know what we're aiming for. And so if you see ways of improving, please give us the feedback. I mean, this is a collaborative effort, right? This is not, education is not transactional. Education is something that we do together. So if we can do things better, let us know. I mean, this is not something our students are shy about, and that's one thing I love
Yeah,
about them. So if you join, you're going to join an active community of learners and teachers, and it'll be great.
fantastic. As a matter of fact, I see a comment from Professor Agustin, one of our professors in the nursing program, and she says, "I see with my own children in school, they have a lot of peer-to-peer interaction via IM, instant messaging, in their LMS, clarifying instructions for each other, etc. It
Yeah.
builds autonomy and independence and communication skill building when faculty is not available, like later in the evening when they're all completing assignments, etc." So great point, Jan, and it's precisely what we want to promote in the adult learning space as well. So, for anyone who would like to get a hold of you, Ruru, or get in touch with you? Do you have any particular email that you would like them to direct them to, or
Sure,
should they?
you can always write me directly at ruru.rusmin@cuny.edu. Or if you have any questions at all, please feel free to write faculty support at sps.cuny.edu. That's
Faculty
faculty support at
support at
sps.cuny.edu.
sps.cuny.edu. I am including both on our comment section, so you can copy it from there. ruru.rusmin@cuny.edu. Ruru, this
Yes,
has been great. Thank you so much. We just scratched the surface, so I'm really hoping that we can connect again and have a follow-up interview in which we might go deeper into one of those three pillars. So thank you so much for joining us today. All the best. And as always, it's a pleasure to work with you and with your team.
likewise.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye bye.